welcome to Broken Rules, a show about people making their own way in music and beyond. I'm John Lanier. Thank you so much for joining us. Today we have a very special guest, Janne Maunu. Janne is from Finland, a great musician who has been in the United States a couple of times back in the 80s and 90s. On his second trip, he and I were part of a band together, and we talk a little bit about that, and we talk a lot about what he's been doing since that time, and we get into all sorts of things musical and how life is a little different there than it is here in the U.S. for musicians and just in general, but he is a wonderful person. So happy to have him on the podcast. Please check out this episode of Broken Rules with Janne Maunu. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome again to Broken Rules, a show about people making their own way in music and beyond. Today, I have a really special guest, a really dear old friend of mine who is joining us from far away in Finland. His name is Janne Maunu. He is a fantastic bass player, singer. We actually were in a band together in North Carolina many years ago, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. But Janne has a great perspective that I think our listeners will enjoy. And so we'll get started. Thank you so much, Janne, for doing this.
Thank you, and hello. It's really good to be here.
It's good to see you. It's been many years.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the same thing. We haven't really even talked for a while, and we haven't seen each other. It was like 15 years or so since my last trip to America.
I think it was 2004, 2003.
Something like that. Somebody got married.
Rhett and Jill McAllister. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the latest we saw. But
well,
it can't be 20 years. But it's coming on 21 years, if I'm right.
Maybe. Maybe. I remember. Do you remember you sang a Randy Travis song at their wedding?
Yeah, and if I remember right, made a fool of myself for not remembering the words in English because I'd been singing the same thing in Finnish.
I don't think you were the only one that made a fool of themselves at that wedding. One other thing I wanted to ask you before we get started, I just thought of it. My dog is. What was the song that you sang? I think it was a Beatles song. We did it almost all of our shows, and then the last verse or chorus you sang in Finnish.
No, I think it was not a Beatles song, although they've mostly all have been translated into Finnish as well. I think it was a song by another like Mercy Beat band, Jerry and the Pacemakers, and the song was "You've Got What I Like."
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's a really big thing in Finland. Bands have been playing it since the 60s when it came out, and bands still play it. But I think that was the song, and we played some sort of like an arrangement which was nothing like the original. But yeah, that was the song, and I did the last verse in Finnish. Yeah.
So, what is it about that song that took hold in Finland? What do you think?
To be honest, I really don't know. Maybe it's because it's in a minor key, and it's a simple song, and it came out in like the 64, 65, something like that. And by that time, the Beatles they had started to come out in Finland as well, and they after Beatles, all those other bands as well, and they just were in the right place at the right time. Plus, the first Finnish version of that song was probably one of the first like translated pop songs there were, and it's just caught on big time. All the stars were in the right position or something like that. But the bands, we have played the song not very long ago, I think, in Finnish, and it's still being played here.
Well, I want to go back and listen to that song, and I'm glad you mentioned that. For some reason, I thought it was a Beatles song. I know we played some Beatles songs, but yeah, You Got What I Like. Jerry and the Pacemakers.
Jerry and the Pacemakers, yeah.
Is that from like 1963, 64?
60 something, mid 60s maybe. They were another Liverpool band, and they were like going. They started at the same time as the Beatles, but then the Beatles just got big. But they were doing pretty good in Britain, I think, and they were popular
Right.
in Europe, but
Right.
not maybe in the U.S.
So that's a great place to start, I think. I'd like to know maybe a little bit about your youth and growing up and how you got into music and what you were listening to. Was your family musical at all?
No, I think that's one thing I've been trying to think about, like my musical origin. But no, I can't. My family, both my mom's and my dad's side, they were not very musical at all. We all, of course, we have to study music at school, but they probably all did the minimum that was required. I have heard after that that my grandma's brother, who's been dead 80 years, he died young of tuberculosis sometime in like late 30s. But I've heard that he used to travel around and play the accordion at local dances. And then I've also heard and read that my grandpa, my mom's dad used to also play dance music in like 30s and 40s. But in my immediate family, no, both of my parents were not into music very much. I have a brother. He's 9 years younger. He became a musician, a troubadour. He's written a lot of lots of songs, and done lots of gigs by himself.
Uh-huh.
But other than that, no. But when what I did, I just for some reason I just wanted to learn the guitar, and I got my first guitar when I was like 11, maybe. It was like a nylon string, a basic guitar. Played for a few years, and then I sold it to a friend of mine. And my parents were not too happy about it. And
Did
then I didn't ask him or anything. I just sold the guitar for whatever reason. I guess I just needed the money or something.
yeah.
And then a few years went, and then one thing also that none of my friends that I hung out with, they were not very musical. They didn't play anything or sing anything. I was sort of the only one in that circuit. Mostly we just rode our bikes, and then when we got a little older, we just rode our mopeds around. But then,
So, well, was there a moment when you realized, or was it just from listening to the radio, or what struck you about that?
I can't really say, and I can't really remember what it was. For some reason, I just had it in my mind that I want to have a guitar, and I want to start playing. And other than that, no, I can't remember very much about it. And then, yeah, I sold the first guitar. Then, when I was about 16 or 17, another friend of mine was selling his guitar because he didn't play anymore. And then for some reason, I got my dad to buy the next guitar for me. It was a little better guitar. Then I started to play a little bit more. Must have been like 16, 17. But nothing more came of it because for example, there were no bands. None of my friends were into music, so we couldn't do any bands, and I didn't know any people who played anything. So I just
Right.
played by myself. And then the first thing really when I played in the band was in the army. I did 11 months in the army from 88 to 89, and there was sort of room with instruments, and there were other people who played, and they played in the bands and had been playing in the bands. I played guitar there, and that's the first time I realized that this could be a lot of fun. I was like, what,
Wow.
21 or something.
Okay.
First time ever I played in a band, and we were just jamming, and it
Yeah.
was really great fun.
So the second guitar you got, was that an acoustic guitar also, or
Yeah,
was
it
that an
was
electric?
there's a Finnish brand which all Finnish guitar players know. It's called Landola, and it's been around since the 40s. But I think they've quit now. They quit a few times and started again and quit. But yeah, Landola is a brand that all Finnish players do. My first guitar was a nylon string Landola, and then my second guitar was a steel string Landola. It was made of plywood. I realize now, but
Yeah.
it looked exactly like. And I meant to look up the Gibson model that it was modeled after. It looked exactly like a very expensive Gibson acoustic
Yeah.
guitar.
Okay.
Is there a brand called Gibson Hummingbird? an
Yes, that's
acoustic
yes,
with like a
yes,
red top.
yes.
Yeah, that's
Hmm.
it. That it was modeled after that hummingbird, and that's the one. And the guitar is still around. It's at my sister's summer house, but it's been sitting there for like 25 years with no heating, so it's kind of
Oh,
warped. But
yeah,
my brother claims that he can still play with it, but I doubt it. It must look like a bow now.
yes. So you were in the army, and that was the first time you really started kind of jamming with other
Yeah.
people, and then kind of what came after that?
Then I came out. It was that must have been what 89. I came out of the army, and then I started my English studies in 1990. Gosh, like 34 years ago. And there were two guys. They started at the same time as I did. One was a guitar player, and the other one was a bass player. And then the bass player had a drummer friend from his town, and didn't take very long when then we had a band together and we played together for like well, until I came to Greensboro, until like 95. We played together.
Okay.
We did gigs, we wrote songs. Well, I didn't write songs, maybe like I tried once or twice, but the guys were good songwriters, and we played like at least half original material.
Right. Cool. Yeah. That's a little bit different than what you often hear. Um, and I don't know that that's particularly unique to Finland, but certainly
Mm.
you hear in British bands, and there's kids everywhere in bands, and
Yeah.
same thing here to a certain extent. But that must have been kind of magical when you finally got to that point where you're like, oh, this is what I've been waiting for, being in a band.
Yeah, I can still remember we had, and I have some photos of that. We started in the fall of '90, the English studies. There were 30 of us in the class, and we had a huge Halloween party. Remember, like around Halloween, we dressed up in costumes and everything, and that was the first time we played together. There was one other guitar player, but he didn't stay with us. But basically, the four of us were together in that, and that was like the first time ever I was up on a stage with a band.
Oh wow.
And there are some pictures, and I think I posted some on the net some years ago when I came across those pictures. I had a leather jacket and boots and I can't remember whatnot, and the bass player was dressed up as a nun. And we had your basic Halloween costumes, but we had a lot of fun. And
Yeah.
then I remember after that we started rehearsing, and I still remember it must have been one of our first gigs, 90, 91, something like that. I still remember the feeling I had after the gig. It was like you said, this is the best ever. This is what I want to be doing. The
Yeah.
first real gig, just the four of us.
Yeah. It's hard to describe to somebody that doesn't know that feeling.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in music in general, and one of the reasons that I wanted to do this podcast, and one of the things you focus on is music is so unique, and it's you know you and I wouldn't be sitting here talking right now if it wasn't for
For
music.
music,
And
exactly. Yeah.
if I'm looking at my life, I wouldn't have 90% of the people that are in my life that are my
Mm,
friends I met
mm.
because of music. And I think that's a powerful thing for sure. So let me ask you, what were you listening to as a kid, as far as music in the culture on the radio? Were you watching music videos, or what was that like when you were, say, a teenager?
It's now first thing you have to realize is that we might have been living in different universes growing up. You did and I did because we had like a what's the word monolithic culture. We had like two TV channels, we had two radio channels to choose from, and of course you had your tapes and vinyls if you wanted to. But basically, you just listened to whatever they gave you to listen.
Yeah.
The Finnish broadcasting company Yle is called.
Uh-huh.
But I have a good story about this. I remember well, obviously I listened to whatever they gave on the radio, and then there was this. I remember my dad's been dead for 35, 36 years now. But when I was growing up, he used to listen to, he had some tapes of the, I don't know what it's called in English, the type of instrument, guitar music, like the Shadows do or did in
Hmm.
the 60s. And that
Hmm.
was a really, really big thing in Finland in the 60s, just pre-Beatles in that, there in 61, 62, 63. And my dad listened to those, and those were uh, one of the first few things I remember listening to when I was a kid. And then maybe that was somewhat influential in that decision that I wanted to have a guitar. But I remember very clearly in 1978 or 9, must have been 78. I must have been 11 years old. There's this Finnish, a really good singer named Maarit, and her first single came out in 1978, and it's obviously it was in Finnish. We have always had a really strong history of pop music, and well, maybe from the 70s, in sung in Finnish, and she
Hmm.
came out big time with a song called, well, it's in English it's called Ice Cream Summer. Ice Cream Summer. And I remember listening to that, and I was 11 years old, and I thought, well, this is ice cream and this is summer. Yeah, those are nice things, but clearly she's singing about something completely different now. I remember the exact moment I was looking out the window in my room, and then it was very, very nice when my wife turned 40, well, some years ago. And then I was thinking about a present for her because she's a huge fan of Maarit and her husband
All right.
Sami, who's a really, really good guitar player and has written most of the songs. I was thinking about a present for Paula, my wife, and then I
Yeah.
thought about that maybe a gig from Maarit would be nice. And then it turned out that there was like the two of the 3 days of the summer they could make it, so they came and played her birthday party. And it was really nice to tell the same story to Maarit about the ice cream summer, that I was 11 years old and I was looking at my window and thinking, ice cream,
So,
summer, nice things, but now you're singing about something else.
so, well, there's a lot of music. That's a common theme in music, right?
Yeah,
Um, so you just asked them to come. These are like stars, and you said,
yeah,
"Can you come play in my
yeah,
backyard?"
yeah. I called their agent and asked if they're free, and he said, yeah, they're free. What's the date and where it is, and they came and played as a duo, just the two of them.
And they're like celebrities.
Yeah, somewhat. Yeah, not in
Yeah.
like maybe the big league, but they've been around
Yeah.
for they're nearly legends, if not already legends.
Right. And these are people that, I mean, that's a rare thing where you just say, "Hey, come, play in my backyard."
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
pretty cool.
yeah.
That
Of
is
course,
pretty cool.
obviously, it wasn't for free, but I
Yeah.
still think it was worth every penny.
Yeah. And did you invite a bunch of friends over and
Yeah,
everything?
yeah, we had a big party.
Did you get any pictures or video of that?
Uh, Sadly, no. I I have none because I was sort of a technician there. I set up the
Yeah.
equipment and everything. I have all the equipment. I
Yeah.
just set it up and like was there, was helping them. But I don't know. I don't think I've seen any pictures of the occasion. But we all still remember it.
Yeah. That's well, that first of all, you're a good husband to do something like that. Was it a surprise or she knew it
Yeah,
was
yeah, she
coming?
didn't know anything about it, and it was like it was a cabin, like way back in the middle of nowhere, and we had arranged, and they almost didn't make it in time because they didn't find their way. It was really in the backwoods, in the part of Finland where Paula is from, and they called me a few times, and then when they were getting close, so we had arranged that a couple of Paula's friends picked her up and took her someplace else, so that they set up their equipment and everything. It took a short while, and then Paula had her eyes covered, and then we escorted her there, and then we took off or what you got, have you, the
The
blindfold. Blind,
blindfold, yeah.
blindfold over the eyes, and then we took it away, and then the first thing she sees is Marit, who says, "Hello, Paula, happy birthday."
Oh, wow.
But
That is awesome.
yeah, I still remember the look on my wife's face when it
Yeah.
dawned on her what's happening.
Wow. That's incredible. That's really cool. So these were I guess pop stars of that era. Um who else was it? Mostly Finnish music you were listening to, or
Yeah,
are
it
you
was.
listening
Yeah,
to?
back to the original question. Yeah, it was. That was like the first time I started to listen to pop music, and then it was mostly Finnish bands I listened to. But then in the early '80s, I did get into this like Iron Maiden, Scorpions, this
Yeah.
kind of stuff. I still have a
Mhm.
few vinyls, but I don't do that as much anymore. I have to name one band though. When the first time I've been in the States twice. The first trip was in '85, '86. I was up in outside of Chicago in Indiana, and then the next time
Uh-huh.
was there in North Carolina. But the guys there in Indiana, they got me to listening to Y&T, which is a band
Oh,
that hardly
yeah.
anybody knew here, but they
Yeah.
were really into that, and I still listen to them every now and then because I think that Many Get to the lead singer is one of the best singers I've ever heard in
Yeah.
in that scene.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
So, would in that time, would bands like Iron Maiden, would they play in Helsinki? Would they tour there in
yeah,
Finland?
yeah, they'd play. Scorpions would play, and well, Aerosmith maybe, but that's a little bit of a different genre. But I was trying to think if they ever played Finland, but Iron Maiden for sure, Scorpions, those kind of European bands,
Yeah.
they played Finland. Not that
Yeah.
they played in where I grew up. No, it was only in Helsinki.
Right.
It's only in
Right. In the
Helsinki.
big
Yeah,
city.
yeah,
Yeah. The big city. So, I did. You're very, I'm guilty, like most Americans. When you said I grew up in a monolithic culture, it's different everywhere, but it seems to me that it's different than a lot of Europeans as well. It would have been your experience would have been completely different if you were in, in the UK or somewhere like that. It's you know, it seems to me that the culture is more universal now, but
oh
back
yeah,
then, like
yeah,
you said, there's only two channels. I mean, we only had three channels here for a long time.
yeah.
Uh, but that's wild. So from a young age, you're not hearing much music. Well, for example, the Finnish broadcasts, were they playing music, American music, or music from British music, or what were they
No,
mostly
they
playing?
really because they really didn't play that much popular music. I remember there was actually they had those two radio channels. To begin with, they had only one, and
Hmm.
they broadcast from like 6 in the morning to 10 or 12 at night. Then they
Hmm.
started the other one sometime in the late '60s, maybe. But I remember the summer of '80 when I was 12 years old. They started rock radio, and that was a big thing. They had rock radio every Monday through Friday from like 3 to 4 or 3 to 5, and that was like a time slot dedicated to rock and pop music, and that was almost unheard of. But I,
Yeah.
I remember I was at my grandparents' summer cottage. The school had just ended, and I was there, and I remember listening to the first ever rock radio broadcast in the summer of '80.
Yeah.
That was a big thing. But before
Yeah.
that, no, they didn't play that much. You didn't get to hear that much or American or British pop music, the latest pop music in the radio.
Yeah. So, and then you were in the U.S. for the first time when you discovered Y&T, and
Yeah,
we're kind of hard rock metal type
yeah.
stuff. And um, what else did you discover in that first trip? Do you recall any other musical things you picked up while you were here?
I musically, I went to my first ever. Well, I haven't been to that many, but the first ever big rock concert was Van Halen show in '86 when just outside Chicago when Sammy Hagar had just joined the band. I can't remember
Yeah.
what was the name of the first album.
5150.
Was that the first one with Hagar?
I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, anyway, that was that tour. That the first tour they did with Hagar. It was must
Yeah.
have been like spring of '86. Rosemont Horizon in Chicago. I remember the place because that was my first ever big concert, and I remember my ears were ringing for like 3 days after the show. But it was amazing. I had never seen anything like that, never in my life.
Well, I mean, uh, it's pretty cool that your first concert was Eddie Van Halen. I mean,
Yeah,
that's about as good as it's going to get if
yeah,
you're
yeah.
a
If you think
fan of
about, yeah,
guitar.
thinking like that, yeah. And I remember one of the, I don't remember much about the music or anything, but one thing I remember clearly is that I remember with Hager is a good guitar player himself, and
Yeah.
it was like a huge stage. They went on different corners of the stage like this, and then Sammy would play something, and then the spotlight would turn to Eddie. He'd play something, spotlight
Yeah.
back on Sammy, and he'd play something. And I must have just sat there, just my mouth wide open. This is amazing. This is something.
Yeah.
Like I said, I had never in my life seen anything like that. But
Yeah.
you asked what did I learn? The first trip, the first thing I learned that there are like 200,000 million radio stations to choose from. In like just
Yeah.
for example, like right outside Chicago. They had many,
Yeah.
many different stations. We had two, like I said, we had two
Yeah.
channels in Finland. The first local, like commercial radio stations had started in the spring of '85, just before I came over the first time. And actually, the
Yeah.
first ever commercial radio station started in the next town over from where I lived, in an even
Yeah.
smaller town that I came from, but they were the first to start, and then they started popping up. But I remember, yeah, I listened to a lot of the commercial radio in America just because I could, because commercials and everything. You can have commercials on radio. That's also something I'd never heard
Right.
before. You can have commercials on radio because it was, sorry, I kicked my table. It was all like state controlled and strictly non-commercial, all that
Right. Right.
radio thing. But yeah, that's one thing I remember, the amount of radio stations you could choose from, and you could listen to all the
Yeah.
pop and oldies and country and whatever
Yeah.
you wanted to.
Yeah. I had forgotten that you came to the U.S. before that. So you went back home, and what year was that?
Yeah,
87?
so
You went
80,
home?
86 I went, and then did the last year of high school.
Okay.
And then I moved to Oulu, which is about 80 miles north of my town, and where many kids from my town went. And then I started. I was going to become a mechanical engineer, but I'm glad I didn't.
So, and at that point, I know about the guitar and everything. Were you singing in choirs and things at school, or doing any kind of music at the university?
Uh, at school, no, I took the required music classes, and then in high school you had to choose, or you could choose between like drawing or arts, and then music. I had the music classes when I had the choice, but then yeah, I didn't sing in a choir or anything. I didn't actually sing much until I went to the army, and then after the army, I did a, I studied 1 year, and then I did the army. It's mandatory. You have to take it at some point. I took
Right.
it there, and then when I got back, it was probably one of the last holidays I had from the army. I met an old friend who had joined like the university chorus, and she
Yeah.
talked me over into applying into the chorus. And then when I got out of the army in '89, then I applied, and I'm forever thankful to her that she talked me into applying, and then I got in.
Yeah.
And that I have really learned basically what I know about music theory and reading music and stuff. I've learned in a choir. I've never had any
Yeah.
formal training, formal guitar lessons, formal theory lessons or anything. I've pretty much learned everything by myself, but the choir, I've had good conductors and good friends in the choirs that has really taught me basically everything I know.
Yeah. And I thought that you just grew up that way because when I met you first, I thought you'd been singing your entire life and that you grew up
No,
doing
no,
that
it
stuff.
it, it had only been like, yeah, after the army. That was like the major turning point. So by the time we met in what was it, '95, I'd only be doing it like for 5 or 6 years at the most.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. And then of course, so you came back to the US when you were in the university
Hmm.
through an exchange
Yeah,
with University of North Carolina at Greensboro, which is
yeah,
where I met you. Was that 95 that you came there?
yeah. It was August '95. Yeah, and then I left the exactly a year after August
And I
'96.
knew, yeah, I knew you were, and you were in the men's glee club there,
Uh,
um, as
at
a singer.
UNCG. Yeah,
Yes,
men's glee and then chorale as well.
right. And were you studying English? What were you studying at
Yeah,
UNCG?
I had a bachelor's in English already from Oulu, from my own university, and then I did some masters classes in English, and then I did some German. Yeah, that was basically
Were
the acad-
were we studying anything when we were there? I don't remember anybody studying. I just remember I don't see. I had to ask you. Did you go to class? I
Well, obviously I did because when I got my degree, then I graduated from my university in '98. I must have done
yeah.
something because I had like a few classes listed in my paper. I must have done something.
I don't remember much about that. But and at the time, so that was been 95. I think that that was about the time that I, I was trying to put together a band with some other people and
Yeah,
you were in the middle of the original thing, right?
yeah.
That was when it first
I
started.
was, I was, I was there from the beginning. I'd say because I've been trying to think this week and now that what was the first time? Where did we meet? Did we meet in men's glee for the first time?
Probably. Probably.
Because I remember one occasion I was hanging out with another exchange student, a girl from Norway, and you were playing, or you had just been playing somewhere near the university, and Anne and I came there, and we just caught like a few last songs or something. I think that was the first time I saw you, and then we met in men's glee after that.
Okay.
But
Was it Tate Street Coffee House?
no, it wasn't the coffee house. Well, it's been 30 years. Memory probably isn't the sharpest possible. But I seem to recall that it was some sort of like an old hotel or something, like a big old building that you played in a lobby. It had been converted to student housing or
Oh yeah,
something.
yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah, yeah. I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
Was there a
yeah.
place like that?
I lived there. Yeah.
Okay,
It
because
was called University Square. Yeah, I lived there.
yeah, that's it. Okay, that's
Yeah.
probably you played there, and that's probably the first time I saw you. I don't
Okay.
remember. Or had it been that we had met in men's glee, that you told me that you would be playing there, and we came there. Either way, but I remember you playing there in University Square.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And were you a bass player, or did you just say we just needed a bass player, and you said I'll do it?
yeah, yeah. I sort of
That
winked.
was the
I was
was
winging
that
it.
your first? Okay.
I had
So
I had
that was
I
your first experience
Yeah,
playing
I had
bass.
always played the guitar, and then in the band, like when I was studying, and we played together with my like classmates, I played
Hmm.
I played like the rhythm guitar because Mika, the other guy who's still playing, he's an excellent guitar player and singer and songwriter. He was doing the
Uh-huh.
lead, and I was playing the rhythm, and I was
Okay.
playing acoustic and singing harmonies and stuff like that. But yeah, I had the full setup, the acoustics and electrics and everything, but because I had always been singing the bass in the choir, I'd
Yeah.
always thought that playing the bass would be cool. And then
Yeah.
when we started talking about the band, and then I just probably decided to wing it. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can play the
And
bass.
so
So that
you
was the
just
first
you
experience. Yeah,
yeah, you just went out and bought a bass, right?
yeah, yeah. It
Yeah.
was and I still had it for I brought it over. I had it for some years, and then I sold it. How stupid of me! I shouldn't have sold it. It probably wasn't that much of a bass, but still, it
Yeah.
would have been nice to have it.
Yeah. And so and you're still a bass player now.
Yeah, and I've been
Yeah.
playing since I came or after I came back from the States. Uh, I studied. I finished my studies. I worked as a teacher. I worked for Nokia, the mobile phone company. But I was playing the bass all along. And then at some
Yeah.
point, I quit my day job, and then I just started playing the bass for a living.
Yeah.
And I did that for some years as well.
And what was that like a cover band parties or what type of
Yeah,
gig were you doing?
we were playing. The thing is that there's one thing about this, like touring bands here in Finland. I don't think that people do that much in America. It's this dance hall or the ballroom dance type of thing,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
that's what we started with our rock band. We had played all kinds of students' parties, and wherever we could, we would play Britpop, our original material, some American stuff. But then sometime in 94, 95, we did a few of those dance hall gigs, and we realized that
Yeah.
there are a lot of gigs, and they pay a lot better than playing your
Yeah.
original material, and obviously
Yeah.
it's all covers. So that's when
Yeah.
I started converting, and then when I got back home from the States in '96, we started playing those type of gigs. So it was like waltzes
Yeah.
and tangos and foxtrots and that thing, and that's
Yeah.
basically what I've been doing ever since.
Yeah.
And what I've been doing
Okay.
for a living is playing those kind of things.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Got it. And still on bass mostly, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I did a thing a year ago that I should have done a lot sooner. I bought an upright bass, and I've been learning the
Oh
upright
wow.
bass now in my old age, and it's
Yeah.
really been a lot of fun, really interesting learning a new instrument at this
Yeah.
age.
Is it 3/4 size?
Yeah,
3/4?
yeah.
Okay. And so are you playing jazz or bluegrass or what are you working on with
Not
the
jazz. I
upright?
don't know that much about jazz, other than it's good. It's nice to listen to, but I don't know how to play
Yeah.
jazz. But I've always listened to country and bluegrass as much as I
Uh-huh.
could, and now last year I joined a local bluegrass band, and we did a few gigs last summer, and now we're doing something in next summer as well. I play the bass there and sing harmonies.
So bluegrass is popular in Finland.
No, it's like like the guy said, or the mandolin player Juho, who's a good friend of mine, said that. I don't know if he had a shirt or was he thinking about having a shirt made that says tens of dollars can be made by playing bluegrass.
Cuz yeah, I mean bluegrass is kind of having a resurgence. It does, and I'm a huge fan of that.
Mm,
And you know who Billy Strings? Have
yeah,
you heard of him?
yeah, we play
What do you
a
think?
few of his things. I've watched a lot of his stuff on
Yeah.
YouTube, and they're good. They're great. He's an amazing guitar player and singer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Billy is.
Yeah. He just did two sold out nights here at Bridgestone. Of course, he lives here, and I haven't seen him live, but some friends of mine went to that, and
Yeah,
he's just incredible. So, what are you guys playing? American songs, bluegrass songs, or are you doing
yeah.
originals?
It's
What are you doing?
traditional songs, and then some newer stuff. It's like this Rye Whiskey. I don't remember what the band is called that does the song Rye
Yeah.
Whiskey, and then some Billy Strings, and some standards, and then the guys have written some originals as well, and we've done those.
Okay. Have you done any recording with those guys yet?
I haven't done. They have. It's a funny thing. They started the band. I know I knew all the players already beforehand when they formed the band. They had no bass player, and
Yeah.
they asked me to join, but I didn't have the upright bass then. I didn't know how to play,
Yeah.
so I couldn't join. And then they had another other bass player, and then when he couldn't make it, though they had a substitute player, and when she couldn't make it, though they asked me. So at first they had no bass players, and now they have three, and we just checked that who can take the gigs. One of the other bass players is playing in a theater, and the other one is a teacher and a professional player as well. So
Okay.
they can't always make it. So I'm like the third choice.
I know what that's like.
Yeah,
I know
yeah,
maybe fourth or fifth.
yeah.
Well, that's awesome. So that's really cool. That's really cool. You started playing bass here, and then you've
Mm.
been doing that. I assume you still play guitar and as
Yeah,
well.
just lately I've been doing. I've gotten into the bluegrass thing. I've tried to learn some bluegrass things on the guitar because the internet is full of like tutorial videos and stuff.
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
played some guitar. Well, at times I play a lot of guitar, but
Yeah.
I haven't learned that much. But the bluegrass, the folk, the kind of things I've been listening to Alison Krauss and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff, the sort of easy stuff, not so much Iron Maiden or Scorpions or even
Yeah.
YMT anymore. It's just like
Yeah.
more of a
Yeah.
folksy kind of stuff
Yeah.
and bluegrass.
Absolutely. That's awesome. And your kids, do they play music at all?
No, the house is full of instruments, and we have decided that they can do it if they want to, but so far they haven't really been interested in playing. But they
Yeah.
listen to at least my older son listens to a lot of music, listens to music all the time, basically.
Yeah.
But it hasn't started yet. But he's not on his way to popularity. He should have started at like 3 years old. But maybe
Yeah.
when the time is right,
Well,
maybe he'll pick up an instrument as well.
yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny. I tried to get my son to play guitar when he was really young, and he wanted nothing to do with it. But like you, he was around instruments all the
Yeah,
time. And then we were over at a friend's house who's a drummer, and he's like, "Who is that playing in there?" And he walks in, and it was my son playing.
yeah.
I was like, "What?" And he just started playing drums, I guess, for just completely out of the blue. So he didn't learn it from me. He just did it,
Is he still playing? I've seen some videos of him playing with a band.
Yeah, he plays drums and he plays guitar now.
Yeah.
He taught himself how to play. Every
Okay.
now and again he'll ask me. He's teaching me now.
Okay. Because we have a bass. We have like 3 or 4 basses laying around here, and one of
Yeah.
I got my son. It's like a 3/4 size electric bass, and he
Yeah.
played a little, but then it was maybe the fact that I would have been teaching him, maybe that was too much, or teaching or showing him stuff, and maybe it should
Yeah.
be somebody from outside and not me.
Yeah. That's exactly the way it is.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, they don't want to hear it from dad,
yeah, yeah,
It's like you hear it from somebody else.
yeah,
Not my
exactly.
dad.
Yeah.
He's just my dad. Well, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, this is a funny story, and I hope I'm remembering this right, but maybe I'm not. When you were here and we were in a band together, and we had bought a Ford Econoline van,
Mm.
blue. It was a blue like 1981 Ford Econoline,
Yeah, if not older.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and I think we were coming back from a gig or something, and it broke down. And I was like, "We're gonna have to have this thing towed." And you said, "No, no, don't tow it. It just needs a universal joint. I'll fix it. I'll fix it." And you remember this?
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
crawled under there and you fixed it. You replaced the universal joint.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we were all just amazed by that. We were like, how does this guy know how to do
Well,
this stuff?
I had just done the previous year. I had just done the same thing on my car. I had a little, really old Opel from
Yeah.
1970s. I had done exactly the same thing on my Opel the summer before. I had changed the universal joint. But
Yeah.
I remember story going a little differently. I think if the way I remember is that Tim, the piano player, had a theater gig, and he
Uh-huh.
was at a Greensboro, there's a community theater or something,
Yeah.
and
Uh-huh.
the van broke down there. He
Okay.
he it broke down when he was supposed to leave the rehearsal or something, and he called me, and I was asleep. I was sleeping in my dorm. I have a recollection of waking up to that phone call that the thing broke
Okay.
down. Can you do something? And I
Yeah.
said, yeah, I can
Okay.
go. I think I drove my own car to the parts shop and then found out that both the part and then changed the
Yeah.
joint. Yeah, but I definitely remember doing that. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. That seems like that was just wild, wild times. I mean, and that must have been uh I don't know. That was just crazy. Crazy times. Good times.
yeah.
Good
And
times.
I have I don't know. I think I sent you a message sometime. Listen to saying that I've been listening to. I have one Nancy Griffith CD, and I listen to it
Oh,
a lot. And there's a song called Fort Econoline on
yeah,
that
yeah,
CD, and I always think about our van when I listen to that song.
yeah, yeah. Well, Nancy Griffith is going to come up a lot on this podcast, and I'm going to be talking to some people probably who knew her. I never met her. I saw her a couple of times, and just I was afraid to talk to her because her music is so important to me.
Yeah,
Um, it's hard to describe. She just passed away a couple of years
yeah,
ago.
I remember, and
Um,
it was noticed. It was noted even here that
really?
she died. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
And I remember I
yeah.
have a recollection of you. What's the bookstore called? The big bookstore in Greensboro. They had like an open stage there.
Oh, that was it's not
Borders,
around anymore. Borders, yeah.
borders. Yeah,
Hmm.
I remember you were doing like a man on guitar thing, and you were singing "Trouble in the Fields"
Yeah,
there. And I remember that was
yeah,
the first time I heard the song, and I said, this is a very good song." And you did it very
yeah.
nicely, by the way. And then after
Oh,
that, I
thank
got
you.
that CD, and that song is also on that CD. And
Yeah.
I've been listening to it a lot. So Nancy Griffiths has come up here as well now.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
I listen to
Yeah,
her a lot. Yeah, I really
yeah,
like her stuff.
yeah. I don't think that. I mean, she's one of the reasons that I started seriously considering writing songs and
Hmm.
moved to Nashville. I probably none of that would have happened probably had I not discovered her.
Yeah,
And that was probably about that time, early '90s. Um, it's just yeah, Ford Econoline, great, great.
yeah,
I think about that too. I think about that van too, and I think we used that van for a couple of things non-musically related.
yeah.
I think we
I
took it down to the beach and
seem to have same
camping.
recollections. Yeah. And I also seem to go. I'm also into old cars. I've had an old car for some years. Haven't now. I have some old mopeds laying around in the house. But I remember it's the van. Our van was probably from the 70s. I'd say it had power steering but no power brakes,
Okay.
which I think was a really interesting combination. I'd never. I had to, and I think it probably had three gears,
Yeah.
something like
Yeah.
that. It was probably wasn't the most expensive you could, but it was probably what we could afford that
Right.
time. But
Right.
I remember the power steering, but not power brakes. That was a very interesting
Yeah.
combination.
So and I've seen, I guess, on your social media, you restore old cars and mopeds and motorcycles,
Bikes
things
and
like that.
radios and stuff like that. Yeah,
Yeah. So you have an affinity for vintage vehicles and radios and things like
yeah,
that.
yeah. Always have. My wife asked me one time, "Where does it?" I was fixing her bike, and she was like looking over my shoulder and asked me, how do you know that stuff?" Which I think is a very good question. You could ask yourself at a point or two, how do you know what you know? And then I started thinking about this. How do I know what I know, for example, about the bikes and mopeds and cars and stuff? And it must have been my dad, because
Yeah.
we always come to think of it now as a dad myself. We always had well, not so good cars, for example. He always
Yeah.
had to work on the cars, and then he taught me how to work on bikes, how to fix bikes and do stuff. And that's where I picked that up. Is mostly from my
Yeah.
dad, and just always having old bikes, having friends who were doing the same thing, not having very much money, always having to buy old
Yeah.
ones, learning to fix them and stuff,
Yeah.
which are good
There's a
skills.
there's
Yeah,
a there's a saying here called necessity is the mother
other
of invention.
invention. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I don't think I assume it's the same there. That's just not part of the real culture anymore. People don't
No,
know how.
no.
People don't repair things anymore. They just toss it, and get another one.
Yeah,
Um,
there's a really good thing that's going around in the internet. I read it a few times, and I think it holds true. That somebody wrote a comment that like 50 years ago, if you read an instruction manual for a car, it told you how to adjust valve clearances. And now, if you read an instruction book for a car, it tells you not to drink battery acid. I think that's a very good sign of how things have changed over the years.
yeah, yeah, it is. It is crazy. It's crazy. One other thing I want to touch on real quick. I know I'm taking up a lot of your time. Is the pandemic? You and I were talking
Hmm.
prior to recording, and I assume it was the same there. It just shut down all your gigs and everything,
Yeah,
right? And you
yeah,
just, you know,
yeah.
you were just like we are, just at home.
Yeah, and I'm a teacher. Uh, like I
Yeah.
told you that we had this distance schooling. It was like,
Hmm.
is it now four? It's now 4 years, and we did
Yeah.
3 weeks of school from home, and then went back.
Yeah.
But what it did, for example, was we had a like a vocal group. We did Monty Python stuff in Finnish. We had like
Uh-huh.
we had a have a really good director. He translated the songs into Finnish, and then we made arrangements. There were 9 of us. We were singing the Monty Python songs, and doing theater beat at the side, doing like really liking the stuff. But then when the pandemic came, it like took all the fuel out of the stuff, because that's so much of a spectator sport that we felt that there was really
Yeah.
no point in rehearsing, because
Yeah.
we couldn't play, we couldn't perform, and that
Yeah.
took like 1.5, 2 years. But after that, when the things started getting back to normal, that was too late. That was probably the death of that band, was the
Yeah.
pandemic, which I feel it was really sad, because we had a really good thing going with those. And the
Yeah.
same thing with gigs, with dance hall gigs, with choral gigs, with everything.
Yeah.
Things are starting to pick up, but for example, the dance hall things I've played now 2 summers after the pandemic, and everybody has been saying that things just haven't been the same after the
Yeah.
pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that's happened here is people don't stay out late as much like they used to. Like people don't, if they we used to go out to dinner at 7 or 8,
Mm,
now go out to dinner at 4:30 or 5 or whatever. And
yeah,
the even live music is still happening, but it's often earlier than it used to be, you know.
but yeah, I remember one thing. That's a good thing you reminded me, because one thing that I thought was really really cool when we started playing around Greensboro is that, for example, we had the steady Thursday gig at that one bar,
Yeah.
and we
Yeah.
always started at 9, which I
Yeah.
thought was really cool, because we had gotten used to over here that gigs start at 10 or 11 or even 12, and they did this.
Oh,
And because the bars stayed open really late, they wanted to keep the people in there, so you have to start
yeah.
playing late to keep the people in. But I
Yeah.
think that that was really cool that you started at 9, and then you played a long gig, and then it was like, it was 11:30, 12, you could go home and then go to work Friday morning.
Yeah.
But if
Yeah.
you start playing at 12:30 or something, there's no way you can stay the
Yeah.
whole night and then go to work the next day. I went to
So, are you Are you playing late gigs like that now, or your shows
No, that
mostly?
that's one thing also that I've noticed that the dance hall things is like the dancing things. They start really early now compared to what they used to start before the pandemic. Start at
Yeah,
7, 7:30, 8, go on to
yeah,
11, 11:30 maybe.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that's a good thing. That it used to be that way back when in the 50s, 60s, maybe even 70s. But for some reason it started getting later and later, and now we sort of gone back to the earlier time, which I think is really good.
yeah. Well, that's because we're older
Yeah,
now, and we don't want to stay up until 3 in the morning.
maybe, maybe. I remember I went out last night actually. It's been a really long time since I was on a gig listening to a band. I went to listen to a band from my youth, from a band from Oulu, and they have their like 40 years anniversary tour now, and they came here
Uh-huh.
yesterday, and they started at 9 and finished
Hmm.
at 10:30, which I thought
Yeah,
was really cool. And then I could come home and go to bed.
that's crazy. That's crazy. Well, it has been an absolute pleasure to see your face and hear your voice. And I don't know why we wait this long
I
before
don't
we
either.
decided to chat. And now we're doing it in front of the whole world.
Exactly. Sort of opening our cupboards and letting everybody see and hear
Yeah,
everything.
yeah. So maybe next time we talk, I won't be recording it,
Okay. And
and
maybe
we can.
next time we talk, we can do it over there, and well, I can fly over
Yeah,
there, and we can do it at your
I would love. Yeah,
fireplace.
and if you end up doing the Merle Fest thing, I'd love for you to come. You could fly to Nashville, and I could drive you there or something. And you definitely need to come spend some time in
Yeah, yeah.
Nashville. I'd love for you
I've
to be
sort
here.
of I meant to do that when I turned 50, but
Yeah,
I never got around to doing that. But I've sort of thought about that. It's one of my things I want to do is take a
yeah.
if I'm working,
Well,
just take 2 weeks off and then just spend all my money
yeah,
and
you
come
can come
over.
here and spend all your money. You
Exactly. Yeah.
can. Well, you can stay. You can stay at my house, and so you don't have to get a hotel.
Okay. Well, thanks.
Okay, hope you all enjoyed that. That was my interview with Janne Maunu here on Broken Rules. We look forward to seeing you again next time. Please come join us again. Broken Rules is produced by Chris Ogle and hosted by me, John Lanier, and we'll keep bringing you great stuff. Come join us again. Thanks.